To be present, we must be intentional, and to bear fruit, we must feed the soul. You're listening to Pause, Sip, and Ponder. Hello, Ponders. Welcome back to another episode of Pause, Sip, and Ponder. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Pauline, also known as Pauline Ponders. And if you are new to this podcast, thank you for joining us. This is a podcast where we talk about everything and anything in the aim to give you some encouragement, some inspiration, gathering stories from other people, gaining perspective. And so I'm so excited for today's episode as we continue to talk about what this podcast is all about, and that is community. And I'm so excited for my guest speaker today. Today I have Mr. Gordon, also known as Norm Gordon, and just some background just to introduce him. He's from Washington Grove, Maryland. He is very in tune with this community and in Montgomery County, which is where we're from. And he has a rich experience in traveling, and not just traveling, but also serving wherever he travels to. He has a bachelor's degree in English literature. He has a Master's of Divinity degree from the Theological Seminary, which I didn't know was a thing. So that's amazing. He's also married to the wonderful Tita Elsie, we call her, and is the father of some of my favorite ladies, Alicia, which we've had in our podcast before, Abby and AJ. He has also served as an associate pastor. And more recently, in 2020, he had stepped down and he felt called to reach out to closer communities within proximity to his home, and it's involving a lot of diverse populations outside of the church walls, and a lot of those seeds were started from this home, actually, which we are in right now. That's why we have a change in scenery, but I'm so excited because to have Mr. Gordon here with me, because I am also very invested in community and in the communities that I am in, and I know that he is a great advocate and a great example of how to reach out to communities and those in need. And so it's a great honor to have you here, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
you for welcoming us into your home. But for my audience that may not know you, can you share a little bit about who you are?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to have young people in my house. I love having them every time you guys come here. Just interesting journey. I was more recently associate pastor of Gaithersburg Presbyterian Church, which is down the road, and was really enjoying that. But I was feeling more and more, shall I say, cut off from the rest of the community because I had so many people within the church to pastor. I was never getting outside the church walls, I mean, it was a big church, and so taking care of, there's 3 pastors, but just taking care of all the people inside the church, there just wasn't any chance to get out. And I was sensing this increasing kind of divide. There was sort of this church culture, and if you weren't in that, you were there was just kind of no way in. And I would meet somebody outside the church, and we'd connect and everything, but it was like, if you don't want to come in, then I can't legitimately spend time with you. So I think that, along with just sensing the drastic changes in culture, I just needed to get outside of the institution and just dive into regular old community and learn. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, and it's been an amazing journey, dragging my family along with me. But I've learned probably more than anybody just about life, about faith, about community, and so yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So leading up to this point, what kind of led you into your passion or your drive for serving the community? Were you raised in an environment where community was always important, or was it something specific that happened in your life growing up?
Interesting that, I think church has always been a part of my life, but serving, it's always been a part of the gig, so to speak. But I have to say the last few years, I think I can think of two specific incidences where I began to see that I had to be about serving the community. Like that had to be something more than just what I was doing. The first one was like 4 or 5 years ago. I was sitting in a room, kind of a square room with a square conference table. It wasn't very big, but there was 3 pastors sitting around 3 sides, and then this community leader was sitting on the 4th side. And the purpose was for us to get to know her and her to get to know us and see how we could coordinate efforts. And I was, getting to know the community, but looking for ways to invest. So we sit down, and I thought it was going to be this nice sort of discussion and exchange of, here's who I am, here's what we're doing, what about you, what you're doing. Instead, for 45 minutes, this woman talked and talked and talked and talked. She talked about Germantown. She talked about Montgomery County. She talked about the poor. She talked about how many meals are being served. She talked about how many meals aren't being served. She talked about what it's going to take to get more meals being served. She talked about the all-around needs of the Latino population, and particularly the immigrant population. And I was waiting for my turn. And I was like, where's my turn? That's great. But, I'm somebody too. And I was getting more and more like kind of irritated. And so this, it's 45 minutes of this, and I'm just about ready to sort of check out. And I stopped myself and say, well, let's give this gal the benefit of the doubt. What can I do? I'm a pastor. I don't bring much to the table, but I can pray for them. So I offered to pray, and she said yes. And at that moment, it suddenly dawned on me, here I am. I was serving in an established church at the time. I'm thinking about what hymns we're going to sing next Sunday, and she's thinking about how a family in Germantown is going to get fed. And I thought, who's doing the Lord's work here? I think they're both helpful, but how can I discount the holy work that she's doing? There was, and that was a turning point for me. I realized I need to get on board with what she's doing. I need to find out and take my faith with me, but I need to follow this woman and see what she did. We are colleagues today. The other incident that happened was during COVID. And, our organization, we have this nice gather, serve, and grow kind of 3 parts to our. And, the gather part kind of couldn't happen during COVID. So what did we do? We just sort of dove into the serve part. And so here I am. I was told, show up at this address and bring people with you. And what are you going to do? You're going to deliver boxes. Okay, so we show up at the Black Rock Arts Center. Couldn't find which door they were at. We finally found them. There's a bunch of young people your age just passing boxes out and giving addresses. Here, take this box to this address and take this box to that address. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the big picture. I just knew this was important, and I was just showing up. Half of serving is just showing up, and that was the beginning. I got swept up in a movement. Grace Rivera Oven, the director of the Up County Hub, started with 23 families, and in a matter of months was feeding about 1,200 families every week. And we just kept showing up. Pretty soon they said, we have a Friday delivery. They were just doing Thursdays. We want to start on Fridays as well. Could you supply volunteers for our Friday delivery? Oh, well, maybe. But we did. We did it. We just trusted that we could, when there's a will, there's a way. And so we started doing that. And we became a part of this amazing movement that is now, feeding all these folks. And so for me, I had to sort of give up the gathering part and just decide this is the work I need to be doing, whether we gather or not. This is the gathering now. I was seeing my folks as they came through to pick up food and take it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, that really reminded me of when Jesus, when there was that man who said, I did all of these things. Like, will I be let into heaven because I've done all of this? But Jesus said, you have one more thing left, and that's to give all your possessions away. And I can't imagine, like, it must have been so humbling, but also like you probably didn't know where to start because when we talked about this before, but when you're in the kind of the rhythm of church and like it's only really about the things that you have to prepare for the next week, you forget about that giving aspect where it's like it's not necessarily all the good things that you are able to have within yourself, but it's things out of your control that God also wants you to invest in, if that makes sense, right? So it's like just getting out of that comfort zone, because we think we're good, but there's always that one area that God calls us, to get into and to get out of our comfort zone.
So absolutely. Jesus spends a lot of time in valleys, in mountains, on lakes. He spends very little time in synagogues and temples. And for me, I think that's important. And that's the journey I had to just follow him out. What's really scary though is, he has to learn his own trade. So the one of the stories that is most meaningful to me is when he meets a Roman centurion, and the Roman centurion says, "I'd like you to heal my son," I think it is. And Jesus says, "Okay, I'll go to your house now." And the Roman centurion says, "You don't need to go to my house. You can just say the word and it'll be healed." And it says, Jesus says, he was amazed because he hadn't seen faith like this among his own people. So Jesus had to discover the power of his own message by going outside of his own. So for me, that means I have to step outside of the church to discover the power of God and what God's really doing. I have to learn. If Jesus has to go get outside of Judaism to learn the impact of his message, I better get outside of my church to do the same. So.
Well, that's really stepping out in faith for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I guess for us, us young people, my generation being of younger adults, and I don't want to say that we are a generation that lacks community, but there are some setbacks and limitations and maybe some hindrances and fear for someone who hasn't really been as involved in community but would like to, or where would they start? Where's a good place to start, and what are the things we should have in mind when getting into stuff like that?
So where I would start is think about two things. One is think about the people whose lives are inspiring you, like currently. Who would you like to get to know more? Whose life would you get to know more? Like to get to know more? Who would you love to have mentor you? Who do you just keep? Who do you find yourself sort of looking around and poking around and showing up for their events and just wanting more of them? And who's following you? So who are the people that kind of show up for your event, or I don't know, this podcast, and who are just always eyeing your life, poking around your shoulder and looking. I remember we were having a meeting here, and afterwards one of the gals was still there, and we were eating a late dinner, and we were about to sit down. Well, if you're at somebody's house and you haven't been invited to dinner and they're about to eat, you can sort of tell they're about to eat. What do? You sort of politely excuse yourself, right? Well, she wasn't really excusing herself. It was like, it's kind of awkward, but and I mean, normally would have said, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're going to eat." So, but we actually fortunately had enough food that evening. So I said, "Hey, would you like to join us?" And she said, "Sure." So she sat down and joined us, and we're eating, and then we finished, and we had dessert, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. And what do you do at 10 o'clock at night if there's like not something that you're invited to next, and it's already 10? You kind of say, "Hey, well, she wasn't. She was just there."
Yeah.
And it suddenly dawned on me.
Wow.
She wants it all. She wants everything she can get from us.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, here's somebody I can pour into, because whatever I have, what Elsie and I have, she wants it.
Wow.
So that's where community begins. It's finding the people that are following you, and then finding, connecting with the people you're wanting to follow, and beginning to find. And if you're not sure which is which or who is who, just listen to conversations. You pick things up. So Pauline, where are you going to be next time? When's your podcast? People that are asking those questions, it's code for I want more of you. So you pick up the cues. A lot of people think Jesus had some sort of a special he could have had supernatural power, but I think in a lot of situations he didn't really need supernatural power to fit. No. He was reading the signs. A tax collector did not do business on top of a tree. That was not his MO. Okay, tax collectors today don't work outside of trees or work out of trees. Neither did they back then. This was somebody who would probably been in a business suit, and he's hanging from a tree. So Jesus just puts two and two together and says, I think he wants something, and I think it might be something that I have to offer. And he says, how about if I have lunch with you? So he's looking at the people who are zeroed in on his life, and instead of making it hard for him, he's just turning around and investing in them. And the transformation of life in Zacchaeus, if you know the story, is phenomenal. So who do you want to follow? Whose life do you need more of, and who is wanting more of your life? And just start providing venues for that to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely on relatability that draw people in. There's always those gurus or people can portray their life on social media of how well immersed they are in habits and keeping up with them. But I think it's really what's sustainable and what keeps people drawn in is seeing people's struggles and seeing their progress and knowing where they came from. And I think that's essentially what testimony is, and that's what I strive for on this podcast. I will ask certain people in my life, hey, can I have you as a guest speaker? And they're like, I don't think I have much to say. And I'm like, no, I know where you came from, how you got where you are today. There's definitely someone who can relate to you, who can learn from that, who are probably going through the same thing. And that's where relatability and connection and community stems from.
Amen.
Is coming together in that way. I don't think just following someone that is perfect is ever going to really grow or create fruits, if that makes sense.
Sure. You tend to grow in community, in those relationships. And I think social media can help us get connected, but it's not, you want to be able to sit down and have that back and forth. Hey, how's your day? What's going on? What's your struggles? What are your highs? What are your lows? And that accountability. Hey, you were struggling with this last week. How's that going? That's where real growth takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just within the community that you are overseeing, but also in your personal life, because we're all humans. So what are some trials and difficulties that you have experienced throughout the process in keeping up with all of this service? Because it's a lot of giving and giving a lot of you to other people. Yeah,
well, that's important. I think early on in ministry, when Alicia was born, it's all Alicia's fault. When Alicia was born, I was just kind of in church mode and ministry mode, and I just, oh yeah, we have this baby, but I was focused on, and this is because this is what I was used to doing, and it was over that first year that I had to begin to switch and go, wait a minute, this is my family, and really reprioritize. But it was a process, and thank God I began prioritizing family over church, because if you it's just a long-term detriment to prioritize work over your family. So that was, getting my priorities straight was probably the first thing I needed to do. And I think, there's always, different management things come up, but I think for me, really being, if I'm centered, spiritually centered, and I say spiritual, I think most people think of spiritual as religious. Well, religion is about, propagating a faith. Spirituality is much broader. It's just how your attitudes, your heartbeats, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. It's not just emotions, but it's your approach to life. If you're not spiritually centered, you really have nothing to give. I decided a long time ago that, if I'm not growing in my faith, in my understanding of, and my trust of God, currently now, I got nothing to give. It really has to start where you are spiritually centered. And I guess from that, you ask about struggles right now. Honestly, the struggles are just making sure I'm following the Spirit of God on a day by day, hour by hour basis. Because if I don't, it just, take faith aside, just practically speaking, I make stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
And I early on in my ministry, in this new ministry that I'm doing, I started a Christian Bible study at the library, because I thought, well, it's at the library, so it's not at a church. So this is really cool. And I just put out the word in the community, who wants to have a Bible study? And I was, and people came, and it was great. But I just couldn't feel centered in my heart about it. When I prayed about it, I was like, and really I couldn't get God on my side. And so I gave it up. It was the weirdest thing, because I was like, it's Christian. It's this is what I like. And what's wrong with this? Well, there's a lot of great ideas out there, but there's the one thing that fits who you are at that time, at that moment. And if you find that right thing, it's not going to wear you out. It's not going to tire you. It's not going to burn you out. You'll do it. You'll be fulfilled. You'll be right with God and with your neighbor, and it'll be fun. It may be challenging, but it's not gonna tax you. It's not gonna disillusion you, demoralize you. So I gave it up, and we started doing game nights, and that has become the staple of our ministry. We have people over, we have dinner, and then we just play board games all night. And when people can see, our group says, what is it about the game night? I said, well, as long as there's love, joy, and kindness happening, then it's good.
Absolutely. So. Oh, and I love that. And I mean, we mentioned it in our other episodes with Alicia, Shane, and Gil. The Gordon household is the place to be, honestly. We love being here in the environment that you guys cultivate. Not only just you and Tita Elsie, but also within your kids. Like, I mean, I'm sure you're really proud of how your own kids have been able to do that themselves without you guys around,
that was a learning process for us, because so here's what happened. We would tell our kids, Alicia and others, our two other girls, find people outside of the church, invite them, and then we'll invite their parents, so it's our kids' friends and their parents, right? Yes. And it was great. So, we had all this great game nights and so forth. And then, as kids do, as they're growing up through high school, you change friends, right? So, their friendships migrated. So we're like, are you going to invite the Changs over? Well, I'm not really their friend anymore. Like, well, we're still friends with the change. What's going on? And so we had to realize that on their kid youth level, that they were learning how to host too, and we had to factor that in. And they were like, no, I don't want to invite. I don't know how. I've got to manage all this. We had to take seriously that they're hosting too on the different age level, and we had to factor that in. So it's a learning process for all of us. But I'm tickled pink that they've adopted those habits and are emulating them. So.
Good job.
and all Pauline's friends, come on over anytime.
Oh,
Open invitation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
One question I thought of that I think a lot of young people, or no, I think anyone in general would be hesitant about, are one of the biggest factors that will prevent someone from stepping out and talking to strangers is rejection. So what's your experience, and how do you react to rejection? And I'm sure you've been rejected many times.
By his own family.
I always leave out a question he doesn't see.
Yeah, so that goes back to, in terms of, I wish I was like this personal font of blessing. It could just dispense and dispense and dispense. But the truth is, I'm a vessel, and if I don't have it, I need to continue to input for me to give out. And so I have a spiritual mentor. I have a personal prayer partner. I've got a ministry coach. I've got a wife who is like the first line of defense for my crazy ideas. Like, no, that's not going to work. I have colleagues around, and these are just, I didn't start out this way. I had to learn, if I don't have those in place, then when I get rejected, I'm just going to fall flat on the ground. I remember in one of my internships when I was still in seminary, we had this great dinner. I mean, and it was the first big dinner I'd ever put together, and I was thrilled, and it went really well. And the next day we had an outreach committee meeting, and they just kind of went on to business. And I was like, aren't you all excited about what happened? And I wasn't getting the affirmation. And I was heartbroken. I remember talking to the pastor in tears, like, what happened? Well, I had to learn to build this infrastructure around me because I'm just one guy. But if there are people around me that, we can, some of those are just on me, and others are mutual relationships, then I can survive when I don't get the affirmation I'm looking for. And believe me, just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean I'm not looking for affirmation.
Oh, for sure.
I can preach a sermon and at
You're
the
like,
door,
amen?
Coming out, 24 people can say great sermon, and I'm like, what about the 25th? It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely something that is difficult for a lot of us. But I always remember that you'll never know what's on the other side until you, just check it out, for yourself and really push the button and just take a leap of faith. So
reaching out and finding people, and we talked about those mentors or people whose lives you want to emulate. And that's can be daring. That can feel intimidating to say, I'd like you to invest in my life a little bit more. But I guarantee you, there's adults out there that would love to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'm just, whenever I'm in that case, like, I always remember that we're just here to plant seeds. We're not the grower. We have no control of that.
Right.
But we're just here to plant seeds, and whatever grows.
Yep.
So I try to remember that, so I'm not too hard on myself.
Let God do the heavy lifting.
Honestly, that's totally fine with me. So I have one more question. So I know this is kind of going back, but I think it's really important to ask at towards the end. Actually, I have two. This is a question before my last question. Is what is the need? I think that's such a good question whenever, if you want to establish like a business or establish like, an event or something, like what is the need? And what would you say for you, you could be in your communities that you're trying to reach personally or the world as a whole. What do you think the biggest need in this world is
Great
to
question.
serve?
So, the last 7 years, I've focused on what the needs are right here. There's a lot of needs in the world, but I just decided I'm going to focus on my own community here. Maybe that's selfish, but it was more sort of self-discovery. I want to know what's going on in my community. It took a long time. It was showing up, finding out who's doing something in the community. Well, let's call him. Well, he's doing this. Well, who does he know? And just connecting dots and asking questions and pursuing. If you pursue something long enough, you'll find out what are the needs in this community. Well, if you know anything about our tutoring program, you know that illiteracy is a crisis. It's not a problem; it's a crisis right now. Where 50% of every Latino student now that's entering third grade can't read. And if you can't read, your chances of dropping out of high school quadruple. Now you think, okay, hunger is probably the most basic need, right? Shelter, clothing. But beyond that, teaching somebody how to read in Montgomery County, there's just no excuse. And 10 years from now, if there's just this teenage massive dropout of high school, we'll blame politicians, we'll blame county school system, we'll blame the county, and we'll blame everybody except ourselves for not teaching them how to read 10 years before, The immigrant population, there are thousands of immigrants coming into this county, and it would take an hour to describe what they've been through. I mean, we have immigrants in this room. These are the poorest of the poor that are just a mom in El Salvador will give a phone number to a teenager and say, here, get over the border and call this number. And getting over the border is traumatic and harrowing and dangerous. And once they're here, they got this number, they call it, they show up at this house, and that home may or may not really know who they are. The legal needs, the health needs, the educational needs are just horrendous. So those are probably the biggest needs. Affordable housing is a huge need in this county. The food insecurity is still a problem, but it has largely been, by really, I call them spiritual giants in the community, has been abetted. So I think among my peers, finding ways to give back to the community, that's a service unto itself. People are looking for ways, how do I give back in meaningful ways? So that's the need that speaks to me the most.
That's wonderful. And it's always good to remember those. Even if things aren't working out, you always remember why you're doing it.
Yeah.
That's why asking why is so important.
Yeah.
We had a question from our live audience.
Well, it wasn't really I was just going to say, Dad, you need to talk about this while you answer this question. I think you don't really touch on, PTA, but I think that's, a whole...
Yeah, so when I started, when I leaped out into the community, I was like, where's community happening? And first thing was remember meetup groups. Meetup.com is a great venue. Anybody can just start a group with any affinity and just say we're going to meet at this time, and it's an amazing venue. Did a lot of that, but began to see that our the people that the demographic that was closest to my heart showed up at the PTA meetings at schools. So Elsie and I started investing in the PTAs and the middle school and now in the high school. And these are folks who are community minded because they're showing up. And this is an opportunity to really, the Montgomery County, and again, this is all part of the learning. You have to learn. Montgomery County, it's not New York City, it's not LA, it's not DC, it's a bedroom community. And people come here to give their kids a good education. Education is huge here. So you want to find people's hearts. They're here in the school system. And you want to find the issues of inequity, racism, social justice. They all show up in the school system. And if we had time, I could tell you some of the things I've seen. But also, again, just trying to be available and showing up. We've been able to help get a new school built. We've been able to, as I mentioned to some people here, we just got back from a PTA meeting at the high school, and we're trying to get Latino parents more involved in PTA because it's an issue of empowerment. So, yeah, I forgot what your question was. That's what we've been. Oh, PTA, yeah. So that's been a means for us to connect with you. It's where the demographic that makes the most sense to invest in shows up.
Yeah, I think it always starts from home. Parent involvement is so important. I hope and pray that I be that parent too, and be more invested in my children, because it really starts from young ages, and that's why I want to be a teacher, because I saw and witnessed and have experienced myself of what happens when there is a lack of parental guidance. And sometimes it's not even like they wanted to not be present. It's because of the systems and circumstances. Sure. And that's why we need more people who are willing and, are able to lend a hand. And that's where volunteers come in. That's where just showing up matters, because that one tutor or that one teacher that one day or that one mentor, just by showing up, can do such impacts on these kids. And so I firmly agree with you on that. So I really hope that, and I'm really fortunate and really glad that we live in Montgomery County, actually, because
a great county
for education. I mean, when we were kids, we didn't really care, but as we look back and get older, like, I definitely would like my kids to grow up here, because we're definitely fortunate.
It's not cheap, but it's a good education.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Gordon, for being here. Do you have anything you would like to share in terms of any events or things like maybe your blog you'd like to share with our community?
Well, first of all, if people are looking for, if they're 21 or over and are looking for an opportunity to invest, and they happen to be up here in the Germantown area, GermantownGC.org is our website. Go on there, and it's information about how to sign up to tutor one evening a week, Monday or Tuesday nights. You can tutor a second grader, and it's a rewarding experience, and you're really making a difference. So also on that website is my blog. You're welcome to go in there. GermantownGC.org. Our organization is the Germantown Global Connection.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. We'll put all the information in the show notes and how you can get involved if you're interested. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you're able to gain some value and hopefully some inspiration, that extra push to get out into your community. Like we've said, it's all about showing up. It doesn't matter how much you have in your pocket, but it's all about you just showing up, and you'll never know who you'll be able to impact. And if you enjoyed this episode and the topics that we discuss on this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much, Mr. Gordon. And I know, and I'm so excited, and I'm so glad I get to witness God work more within your family and your communities that you're impacting. And so I have great hopes for this year for you guys. So
thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to always love, to always be curious, and to always ponder.